and welcome to our program today. I'm Rena Palloff, your host for the next 90 minutes as we further explore issues in online teaching and learning. This program, Pedagogy 202 for Distance Learning, is a continuation of our program earlier in the season, Pedagogy 201 for Distance Learning, Enhancing Interactivity. Today, we'll be tackling ways to approach student outcomes and assessment at a distance. Dr. Badrul Khan is also an international speaker, author, educator, and consultant in the field of online learning and educational technology. His latest books, Managing E-Learning Strategies and E-Learning Quick Checklist, are translated in over 10 languages. He's an associate professor of the Educational Technology Leadership Program at George Washington University and founder of bookstoread.com, a recommended reading site on the internet. Welcome, Badrul.
I'm very pleased to be here today with you all.
Some instructors still believe that they can simply take traditionally based classroom approaches and move them over to their online environment. Badrul, you've been researching this question for many years. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you. I think it's an excellent question. As you see, that online learning environment is completely different than face-to-face environment. There are issues that we have on online learning. The learners are remote and they are diverse culturally, geographically, with their different background and learning styles. So we are dealing with a challenging situation in online environment. And since '97, I've been researching this question, what does it take to create meaningful learning environments for diverse learners worldwide? Well, with my research, I found there are so many issues, and these are very critical issues. And I clustered these issues in 8 dimensions, which you can see on the page 24, a model that I created, I call a framework for e-learning, or you could call it framework for online learning. I will just briefly go through the issues surrounding this framework to make sure that while you are designing these online courses, it should be designed meaningfully so we can do the appropriate assessment of what we are teaching students. Now, in the pedagogical sections, always we are concerned about that where what kind of pedagogical philosophy the instructor should have. Is it like instructor role? Would be a more facilitative or are you going to be didactic? Now let's move on to technology. We are very concerned about in online learning, bandwidth is a bigger issue. So we have to see the infrastructure, how the students are dialing up or they are using the high-speed cable modem or internet. So we have to be concerned about those issues. And the next we have a situation like interface design. This is a fascinating area. It's got to do with cross-cultural communication. With the blessing of internet and digital technologies, now we can offer courses all over the world. More we can offer all over the world, we have more issues. One of the issues, like I'm originally from Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, thumbs up means I disregard you, I challenge you. In the Western culture, it means way to go. See, it's cross-cultural communication, this sign and symbol you use on online courses. If someone get the answer right and he is in Bangladesh and getting a feedback with thumbs up might be not very good. The same way you can see as you move along on this framework, evaluation. In face-to-face classes, we only evaluate people who are teaching the class. But in online education, there's a group of people involved in online education. They are instructor, they are subject matter expert, they are technical support, there are counselor, there are administrator, all these people, they need to be evaluated and how they're working because all we care, I'm advocating, advocates for learners. Are we providing them the meaningful learning? And then move on to the next is a resource support. Do they have 24 hours, 7 days a week resource support? The next one is ethical. You have to be very ethically, very competent in teaching online. If you want to have live chat room scheduled, and if you have students from all over the United States, within the United States you have 6 time zones. So someone would not be so interested waking up 5 in the morning if you set up a chat room that in DC will be 7 in the morning. Oh, it will be 8 in the morning. So you see that geographical diversity is an issue that we have to be considering. And in institutional dimension, People always asking this question, the online, that my son taking this class, is it as good as he would have gotten if he was taking the face-to-face classes? Well, then you have to design it such a way that you don't get kind of questions. You might answer this. Now, my whole idea of bringing this framework and linking it to assessment is basically to see we are asking a student to perform, but at the same time, we have to do our work, is creating meaningful learning environment, even addressing the issues I talked about around these 8 dimensions, so that students feel good and learning happens and an instructor enjoy teaching these courses. So I feel very excited to be able to share these thoughts on the assessment. I think it's a very important topic.
Thanks, Badrul. Those are great examples.
How can he effectively grade online discussion to support these processes?
Badrul, what are some of the other challenges of online grading that you can think about?
Well, in our online teaching, you will see some students post more frequently than others. And it is the quality that we are looking for, not the quantity. So you have to keep reminding our students that they need to be very focused, and each posting and each response that they do online has to be with quality, focus, has to be written in a way that others can learn from it. So if someone is not posting as much as other, we should not assume that someone is posting more frequently, learning or getting more learning experience from this discussion than others. We can assume that. But as faculty, I know it's challenging to, and it's time consuming, keep reminding students they should be on focus and respond appropriately to each questions. But it has to be done. We have to keep reminding them is the quality that counts, not the quantity.
We've received an email question, and Badrul, I think you might be the one to handle this one first. The question is, should you decide on the kinds of activities first and then try to find a way to measure achievement? Or should you decide on assessments first and then find activities to support them?
I think it depends on your pedagogical philosophy. Like if you are more like a facilitative versus you are more like an instructivist. If you are really facilitating, you would probably combine them both. You should have an overall goal, not objectives, that this is in a specific topic. You want to have a meaningful dialogue going and the student can learn from it. So I think having a goal and then you can design it accordingly to the goal. And if they can achieve their goal, then I think the assessment is done. I'm not really talking about a specific objectives, it's an overall goal. So I hope I answered these questions. Go ahead.
So now let's look at how to assess group work online. The next scenario is entitled Grading Student Collaboration.
A professor teaching a course online has given her students a collaborative assignment based on small group activities. Many students are actively involved, but she is concerned that a few may not be carrying their weight in the group. She is concerned how she can address possible inequities in the level and quality of student collaboration. How can she effectively and fairly grade collaborative assignments?
Asking an interesting question, which is, what definitions are we using for assessment and evaluation in the world of online instruction, and how are those different? Badrul, do you want to take a stab at that?
Well, when I talk about evaluation of online learning, I'm thinking about evaluation of all individuals involved in providing the online services. That includes evaluation of an instructor, evaluation of technical support, evaluation of counseling, registration, library support, all other support services. When I talk about assessment, I talk about assessment of learners. So yes, that's what I would think the difference between evaluation of online learning environment and other one would be assessment of learners.
Right. Right. I think that we do have a tendency to mix those terms up and use them inappropriately, and I would agree with you. Assessment is the learner, and evaluation is more of the environment and the overall course or program. Yeah. Great. Okay. We've been talking a little bit about collaboration and some of the challenges of group grading. What are some of the techniques that might work for group grading? Badrul, I think you had some ideas about how you might deal with a situation like that.
Thank you, because I have faced some situation like that. What I have come up with a mechanism, I give them group private space in the learning management system. And there they have goals and assign tasks for individual member. So they can interact with them and communicate through this group space. And I can also go and see what they are doing. If I see there are areas that assigned tasks not been done by an individual member, I would send a private message. So my early intervention helps. So, and maybe someone is not responding or doing the task or learning task. Maybe they are confused. They don't have enough information. So what I try to do, I try to send private email, even go into the private space with their permission, that I put feedback. You're doing good. This is how you do it. So I think early interventions kind of solve that problem. So you bring the group dynamics together, and they will be more collaborative than they are complaining about each other.
Okay, let's move on to our next scenario at this point. This is regarding the student as the teacher.
An instructor understands that oftentimes in an online collaborative learning environment, students benefit more from giving help rather than receiving it. In his course, he encourages his students to act as facilitators for discussion, lead seminars, and give peer feedback. What techniques can he use to assess student-led activities?
So, Badrul, what techniques do you use to assess student-led activities?
It all depends on how well you prepare your students. In my classes, what I do, I ask students to do some research on their assigned discussion moderation. See, I assign a student to moderate the discussion topics. So they do some research and they submit some of the questions they want to run into discussion forum, and I negotiate with them. And I even advise them on those questions. And then what I do, I tell them that, are you comfortable with these questions? Can you generate enough discussions? And what can you contribute? After this negotiation, we are able to arrive at a point where we can have final discussion questions. After that, I ask them to do some resources, link to some resources that, while a student asking questions, you can always point them to those resource websites. And I also give them some tips on how to be a better successful moderator. And they can also check up those links. Our practitioner or field have created enormous resources, so they can visit those. And when the discussion is going on, I stay away from it, let them have a natural discussion going on, and they do a pretty good job. And I'm very happy they do it, because it's our homework as an instructor. We give them the good guidelines. But if anyone is failing to, cooperate or could not continue, I would send a private email, which works pretty good. But then the moderating team or moderating person who is doing it will analyze and summarize what dialogues from all different responses. And then when I look at this summary, and also I'm lurking in the discussion, I'm seeing what they're doing, and it gives me a pretty good idea how I can do my assessment of how a student-led discussion went.
Let's continue with our next scenario, exploring forms of assessment.
A professor teaching an online course strives to get her students to demonstrate a deeper understanding of concepts through their demonstration of good analytic and evaluative skills, as well as the development of knowledge, concepts, and ideas. She understands that her assessment of their work needs to align with these goals. What are some creative and effective assessment tools to encourage the development of these skills?
What are some creative and effective assessment tools to encourage or evaluate the development of these skills? Why don't you start us off, Badrul?
Well, in my courses, what I ask students to do is that every chapter, every article that you read as your reading assignment, I would like you to write your reflections on those with respect to the practical aspects to it. For example, I tell them, suppose you're working for an institution and your institution is interested in implementing e-learning, and you are a member of that e-learning planning team, and you have been sent to a e-learning conference for a week. Upon returning from the conference, you have been asked to write your reflections of every presentations that you win. And in your newsletter, if you write it and they think that they will benefit from what will be working, what will not be working for the institution. So I ask the student treat each reading assignment as if that you went to a conference presentation. And then my students write the summaries and reflections of their understanding of that the concept from the particular article and chapters with respect to what they will be able to use that in their organization. So it's more like a reflection of their learning and relating it to the practical aspects. And by looking at that, it helps me to evaluate their work and assess their performance.
So let's take a look at this question a little further in the next scenario called outcomes-based assessment.
An online instructor teaches at a school which is redefining their curriculum with outcomes-based objectives. In so doing, the institution is de-emphasizing the use of tests and quizzes in favor of other forms of assessment. He is not sure what this means in terms of his assessment practice and how to incorporate outcomes-based assessment into his course. Does this instructor really need to give up the use of tests and quizzes?
Does this instructor really need to give up the use of tests and quizzes? That's a good question, and it's very controversial in some institutions. Bedrul, any additional thoughts?
Well, first of all, we have to follow what institution's policy is. So I know as an instructor, I have own teaching style, teaching philosophy. However, looking into the institution's policy, I might be in conflict with my philosophy of teaching. As long as I'm working for this institution, we can compromise, we can minimize that conflict by, for me to look into other way of assessing my students' learning and still following the institution's policy. So I would say that that's what I would do.
I think what you're saying is very interesting, and I think that when you say the word compromise, there are some ways to compromise that won't sort of go against institutional policy or hurt the students in any way, and will also demonstrate learning. For example, if you're giving a final exam, that final exam doesn't have to be multiple choice.
True.
It could be a short answer or an essay exam. It could be an open book exam where some of the objectives of the course are assessed and it meets institutional demands. Let's go to our next scenario, the assessment continuum.
A professor agrees assessment requires attention to learning outcomes, but is equally concerned about the students' experiences that lead to those outcomes. He is still struggling with creating reflective activities that will allow him to periodically determine how students are doing in the course and if any changes need to be made along the way. What are some means by which he might include ongoing reflection and assessment in his online course?
We've touched touched on some examples of reflection in response to previous scenarios, but what are some other means by which an instructor might monitor ongoing progress and provide feedback to a student? Okay. Badrul, your thoughts?
Yeah, I use some technique because I know many times I have seen students, they don't have any project ideas. So what I ask them to do, I create a general discussion area in the learning management system, and I ask the student, why don't you post your ideas? And others, provide feedback, and I provide feedback. So after some time, the project idea is refined, and this is I call ongoing feedback for improvement. So we can come up with our own innovative ways to install some of this mechanism in the virtual space that will help ongoing improvement for our students' learning.
I think also it's important to sort of build a process for them. I think that's what everybody has been saying with these examples, is that asking students, for example, to submit pieces of their final project along the way rather than just waiting to the end of a course and getting that final paper from them can be helpful. And it helps to sort of scaffold their learning. It builds a foundation under their learning so that it becomes more incremental. Our next scenario that is more specific to recognizing who is doing the work online, a very thorny issue.
After a recent faculty development workshop, a professor returns to her institution enthusiastic about replacing her tests and quizzes with a number of different assessment tools. She worries, though, that these changes will compromise the integrity of her online course and is concerned that without proctored exams, she won't be able to identify if her students are actually doing the work. How can she know if her student has done their own work online?
Badrul, do you have any additional thoughts?
Yes, as you know, over time, students will develop tone and voice and consistency in their writing. So when the instructors are really engaged and involved, they can recognize the students from begin with and how they are progressing. So in my courses, I do not have that problem that students are not doing the work, because at the beginning, we get the tone and voice and consistency to know their final project is really the same students who started working with me to begin with.
Right, good point.
An instructor wants to explore new ways to support and assess effective learning in her online course. After consulting with some of her colleagues with more online experience, she has come to believe that effective online learning incorporates such approaches as real-world perspectives, case-based analysis, and collaborative learning. How can she align these pedagogical designs with effective assessment?
How can she align these pedagogical designs with effective assessment? Badrul, your thoughts on this?
Well, in my courses, I encourage the student to do the group projects in the real-world situation. One of my courses at GW I taught called program evaluation. And my student used this 8-dimension I earlier mentioned about the e-learning, and they used this criteria to review online programs about 6 academic institutions in the U.S. and Canada. And the way they did that is it was a semester-long project. They would work directly with all the individuals involved in online education in those institutions, and they're working with the real client. That include provost, deans, chair, program directors. So I kept a mechanism to give them my feedback on the status of their project with the real-world project. And at the same time, their contact person would send me an email and give me some feedback. So based on their project reports and input from the clients or the contact person, I was able to make a good judgment of how realistic and relevant their learning goals for the specific project. And I must say that I'm very excited having students to do online projects. And it's easy to do that. They use email, sometimes telephone, and virtual spaces for chatting. And all the documents about online programs are available online, and resources. They could review them. So it saves their money and time even go to on site.
Great. And our time has just flown this afternoon, and this one is an interesting one from Phyllis at the Community College of Denver, who asks, regarding private journals and reflections, would those be more effective in the public forum, as in discussions, or kept private between the instructor and the student? Since we want to foster collaborative work and critical thinking skills, would these types of activities be more effective in public? Badrul?
Yes, I think it would be nice to have others see what our students' reflections are. In my course, students write reflection on their readings, and other students are reviewing them and provide some feedback and ask questions. So it can extend their learning in a more higher level. So I would think it should not be very private. It should be very transparent, open to the learning community. The whole class is a learning community. And I must say that virtual education has got more learning community than in the face-to-face classes because of the limited of 4 walls and scheduled time. But once post a reflection there and is there asynchronously, students can reply to that, have more time to think and write, and have more resources to search and provide better feedback. So I think it's all good thing. For whoever did the facts, I will encourage you to make it very, very transparent and get everybody involved in everybody's learning.
Yeah, I would agree, and it also teaches us as instructors to get a whole lot better at how we give feedback to our students if that's going to be viewed publicly.